Next up is Oregon edge target Wyatt Gilmore. Wyatt Gilmore comes out of the state of Minnesota, Rogers Senior High School. He was also on campus for a visit this past weekend, and he's a big target for the Ducks along the edge. During his time at Oregon, he got to spend time mainly with Tony Tuioti. He talked about how faith and family are really important to Tuioti, and that resonated with him because that is a big part of his core values. You can see his tape here as an edge player, really, really disruptive. I think he's the top player, according to 247 Sports, out of the state of Minnesota. And I think he's the number 32 edge in the country, but 6'4", 250 pounds. Oregon wants to keep adding difference makers along the defensive line of scrimmage. They kind of mainly see him as an edge right now, but depending on how he develops, maybe they see him moving all over the defensive line. But this was a guy that I think is a little bit newer in terms of Oregon offers. But he said that once I got the opportunity to go take a visit, I could not pass it up. So this was big for the Ducks to get him on campus and just kind of get a feel for where he's ultimately at in his recruitment. It doesn't sound like he's a guy that's very close to being finished with his recruitment right now, but he's got a lot of schools that are coming after him. Really feels like it's kind of a Big 10, Big 12 recruitment in terms of schools outside of Oregon that are going after him. Let me look and see what other schools are involved in Wyatt Gilmore's recruitment as we stand here in March. Let's see who else is in the mix here, who he's hearing from the most. He's hearing the most from Minnesota, Oregon, Miami, Missouri, Oklahoma, a lot, Iowa, Kansas State, Kansas, Purdue, and Wisconsin. So that's like, most of the big schools in the Big Ten aside from Michigan and Ohio State. But he did tell me that he's got trips coming up to Missouri and Oklahoma. Those are the next ones on the docket for him. So the nice thing is that he said that, Oregon stood out enough to get a return visit. He doesn't have that scheduled right now, but he said that he probably thinks he's going to go back to Oregon for another visit. And there's one thing that is really setting Oregon apart in their recruitment of Wyatt Gilmore because of how they check a very important box for him. He talked about the most important factor in his recruitment is professional development or is just player development, right? Because he wants to go to the NFL. That's what most of these guys want. And he's saying, between Dan Lanning, Tosh Lupoi, and Tony Tuioti, those are three really high caliber coaches. Obviously, Dan Lanning was at Georgia as their DC, and then Tosh Lupoi spent some time in the NFL. So he loves the coaching pedigree that, can help him develop at the University of Oregon. And he just feels like it's great for him to be successful there because he has guys that are so defensive minded, so many strong defensive minds that's really going to help him on it, get to his ultimate goal. But as far as, a decision timeline, he says he'll probably take his officials throughout the spring and August, and then maybe try to commit towards the end of the summer. So that's what we're seeing a lot of these guys do. So you can imagine why it would be important for Oregon to get him on the field, on campus in spring, kind of get a feel for where he's at, hopefully get a return visit. Maybe that's an official. I think they're in a good spot for that right now. But again, Minnesota, Midwest, not really an area that Oregon recruits too heavily, but you can see Wyatt Gilmore here just being an absolute animal physically off the edge, and then also just handling some guys, blocking as well. Got some good change of direction, some good straight line speed. Here he is chasing down a play from like 20 or 30 yards away. So this dude's got a motor without a doubt. But Wyatt Gilmore is another big-time prospect that you got to keep an eye on for Oregon here in the class of 2024.